welcome to Chapter 2, where we're going to be talking about cost behavior, operating leverage, and profitability analysis. Chapter 2 is very dense, and there's a lot of material that's what we're going to be covering, so I'm going to split it up into several videos. First, we're going to talk about the difference between fixed, variable, and mixed cost behavior. This will help us in the future when we're talking about decision-making processes that managers need to make for certain products, selling, pricing, etc. So a fixed cost is a cost that remains constant no matter how many units you make. So an example is you're going to pay a band $48,000 regardless of how many tickets are sold. If you sell one ticket, it costs you $48,000. If you sell 20 tickets, it costs you $48,000. So no matter how much you sell, the total is not going to change. So when we're talking about fixed versus variable, we're talking about the total cost. However, if you were going to take that total $48,000 and divide it by the number of tickets that you actually sold to get a cost per ticket, then that number is going to change. So as you sell more tickets, the cost per unit is going to decrease. And when the activity decreases, so when you sell less tickets, the cost per unit is going to increase. So this is an example just attaching numbers to it, okay? So the cost of the band is $48,000 in each scenario. If you sell 2,700 tickets, the cost per band is the cost of the band per ticket is $1,778. If you sell more tickets for 3,300 tickets, the cost is going to go down per unit. Okay. So what does this mean in terms of operating leverage? Well, operating leverage refers to the cost structure of the organization. All right. So it talks about what percentage of your costs are fixed versus variable. So a small percentage change in revenue is going to occur when you have less fixed costs. A larger percentage change in your profits is going to occur when you have higher fixed costs. So you can look at this here. So depending where your fixed costs fall, it's going to dictate how much of an impact is going to be on your profits relative to a change in your revenue. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So here, all of the costs are fixed. So when you have a small change in your revenue, this is a 10% increase, 3,000 to 3,300. It's actually going to result in an extremely high percentage change in your gross profit. So your gross profit increased by 90%. So when all the costs are fixed, every additional dollar sales contributes to $1 of gross profit. Now let's talk about variable cost behavior. Variable cost behavior means that the total cost is going to change based on the number of tickets that you sell. However, the cost per ticket or per unit is going to remain the same. So the total variable cost increases in direct proportion to the number of tickets sold. So if you sell more tickets, your total cost is going to go up because the cost per ticket is going to be $16 no matter what. So you're going to pay the band $16 per ticket sold. Before, when we were talking about the percentage increase, where we went from $6,000 to $11,400, and we said it was a 90% increase, how do we calculate that? Well, this is what we're comparing it to. Okay, so we're comparing the profits for 3,300 tickets versus 3,000. So we're going to take 11,400 minus 6,000, and then take that difference divided by the base, which is the $6,000. So this works anytime you're comparing two things, whether it's prior year to current year, budget versus actuals. You just have to remember what your base measure is. So here we were comparing it against 6,000. So to recap, total variable cost increases in direct proportion to the number of units sold. The behavior of variable cost per unit is contradictory to the word variable because variable cost per unit remains the same. It's the total cost that's changing, so that can be a little bit tricky for people. So here's a graph As your activity increases, the total variable cost increases proportionately while the per cost unit stays the same. So now let's look at the effect of the cost structure on the profit stability. So here we have three different companies. One is all fixed costs. So you can see their fixed cost is $60. The middle company is a combination of variable and fixed, and then the third company is all variable costs and no fixed, okay? But you can see that their net income is the same for all three companies. So let's see what happens when the number of units sold increases. So we're going to sell one additional unit. For a fixed company, the impact to income is greatest because all of the income that they make, the additional unit that they sold, doesn't need to cover any variable costs. So it's all going to go straight to income. The combination is in the middle, and the all variable has the lowest increase in income compared to the base scenario. The same could be true when income goes down. So you can see that whether it's all fixed, all variable, or somewhere in between is going to have an impact on how big of a percentage change your sales is in relative to your income increase. So when you have a high level when you have a high level of fixed costs, your earnings volatility is high, and when it's low, the earnings volatility is low. It's not going to change much. Now let's look at an income statement using the contribution margin approach. So a contribution margin is a really important concept that we're going to talk about the entire semester. You're used to seeing a normal income statement that has sales, cost of goods sold, gross margin, less expenses, and then the net income. Here what we're doing is we're starting with our sales. All income statement starts with sales. And then we're breaking out our costs between variable and fixed costs. All variable costs, regardless if it's manufacturing or selling, is going to be shown here. The difference between your sales and your variable costs is referred to as your contribution margin. Then you subtract your fixed costs to get your net income. Your contribution margin represents the dollars that you can keep and go towards the bottom line once you've covered your fixed cost. That's going to be used to help us calculate the magnitude of operating leverage. So remember we talked about the volatility is higher when you have higher fixed costs? Well, we can actually determine how much our net income is going to change based on the change in sales. And the way that we do that is we take our contribution margin and divide it by our net income. So, as he says, let's look at an example. So here we have sales of 50,000, variable expenses of 30, contribution margin of 20, minus fixed expenses of 15, net income of 5. So our contribution margin is $20,000. We divide it by our net income of $5,000, gives us a magnitude of operating leverage of 4. What this means is that for every percentage change in sales, our net income is going to change by 4 times that. So if your sales goes up by 10%, we can expect that our net income is going to go up by 10% times 4, which is 40%. So here's that example. Our sales went up $5,000, which is 10%, and our net income went up 40% from 5,000 to 7,000. The percentage increase there is 40%. I'm going to introduce this concept of mixed costs or semi-variable costs. Basically what it's saying is that a portion of the costs are fixed and a portion of it is variable. So for example, this company has to pay a janitorial company a base fee of $1,000 plus $20 per hour required to do each cleanup job. The base fee of $1,000 is fixed while the $20 per hour is variable. So a portion of it is fixed, and then if they work 60 hours, it's going to be an additional $1,200. These are all types of different mixed costs that you see in companies. Now we're going to talk about selecting an appropriate time period for calculating the average cost per unit. This can get a little tricky when you're trying to figure out your costs. So here we have a company that has 3 different types of costs. You can rent equipment for $80 per day. We have to pay our instructors $15 for every hour that they're teaching. And then we're going to have fuel of $2 for every hour of classes. And this is to provide water skiing lessons. So they can average up to 20 lessons per day. What is the average cost for a 1-hour lesson, for 2 lessons per day, 10 lessons per day, or 20 lessons per day? Well, if you did it based on 2 lessons, 10 lessons, and 20 lessons, you'll see that the cost per lesson varies between those because the variable cost component, the fuel and the instruction. Average costs decline as activity increases when fixed costs such as equipment rental are involved. So because there is a fixed and variable component, we can't just take the average of these costs, or else, we can't charge lessons of $57 per lesson when there's only 2 that day, and then the next day say, oh, lessons are going to cost us $25 today. Customers wouldn't be happy with a constantly fluctuating price per lesson. So instead, what we do is we come up with weekly, quarterly, monthly averages. So we look at our daily activity and then we try to project out what would happen on a weekly basis. So here we're saying that there's 7 days at $80 per day. On average, every week we're doing 50 lessons. We're going to calculate those and we're going to come up with an average cost per lesson of $28.20. Then we can calculate how much we should be charging our customers now that we know it's costing us on average $28.20 per lesson. So I'm going to pause here and flip over to the next video where we're going to talk about the high-low method and regression analysis.